everyone, this is Richard from Modern Healthy Hong Kong, and welcome to part 3 of our series on epigenetics with Professor Szyf. In part 1 we talked about epigenetics and how it reacts to our environment. In part 2 we looked at DNA methylation and considered whether it was reversible. In this part we will discuss more detail on how DNA methylation is related to aging, including why we age, can the speed of aging be affected or even reversed, and can we use DNA methylation as a measurement of age? We did record this interview at 2 different times, so there will be a short break in the middle. And with that, let's get on to the interview. Yeah, I mean, so Dr. Horvath, he did some work and he showed that there was a way of measuring your biological age by the amount of methylation that had happened. Actually, so that's actually one of the questions that I had. Is it the amount, or is it the style, or how is DNA methylation tied to age?
So, one of the important discoveries in the aging research, why do we age? Genesis says it's a punishment. We should have lived forever. It's a primordial sin that, brought death to the world. But death should not be taken for granted. And we don't understand why we age. We also don't understand why it's such a predictable process, right? Your dog will live 15 years, your cat will live a certain amount like this, your mouse will live a year and a half, certain insects will live 3 weeks, and almost without change. Why? So it was clear that our lifespan is already encoded in our genome. But it's also clear that it's not just the genetic information, because we see a lot of noise around ages. So humans live now 80 years, but they used to live 35 years. So, and we know that we have changed environments, not just the medical environment, but a lot of things have changed that make people live longer. But why? And so the idea came that aging is also a gene expression programming. So the same way we program this tissue as a heart and this tissue as a lung, we are already programmed how many years we live. And that's epigenetically programmed. Because what you see is a very predictable change in gene expression as we age. And it was known that methylation also changes as we age. So the question was, do all people change the same way? Is it absolutely identical with a chronological age? So is it driven by, let's say, the magnetic forces of Earth and the way times that Earth is turning around, and this will be, but then everybody should have died at the same age. And we know that that's not true. So that suggests that some people age faster than others, and that is mediated by epigenetic processes. So Horvath wanted to look for, where are these marks? Where is this epigenetic program that programs us to live a certain amount of time, and that is different between people? So what you would anticipate if such a program exists, that it's similar within a species to a certain extent, but it has degrees of freedom. So we can see the same changes that we see in lifespan within that program of epigenetics. And this could be in qualitative or quantitative. Qualitative means different genes will be methylated at different times in life. Or qualitative, the same gene is getting more and more methylated or less and less methylated as we age. And that causes changes in gene expression, and eventually it brings us down because our immune system fails, or muscle fails, etc. And it appears that probably it's a mixture of those, but Horvath has been able to find 350 different positions in the genome that are predictive of age. That means they will change. The amount of methylation in these genes is changing with the chronological age. So it will have a certain value at birth, and that value will keep changing till you die. and that in most people it will be the same, because most people will live around 80 years, but in some people it moves really fast, and these people might be people who will die younger, and in some people it moves very slow, and these people perhaps will live longer. And when this clock was tested in several studies, it seems that if your clock moves fast, you live shorter, and if your clock moves slow, you live longer in general terms. However, there are many questions. It's not etched in stone yet, but it suggests that we do have a clock that can be fine-tuned. And now if you combine this idea of epigenetics with the idea of reversibility of epigenetics, the immediate conclusion is, can we change it? Yes, if my clock is ticking too fast, can I do something to make it tick? Can I take it to the watchmaker and fix it so it moves either accurately or even slower than accurately? So this is the big question. And now it will become another probably synthesis of epigenetics and aging research and environmental biology to see if environmental and experiential changes can alter lifespan.
Right, but that kind of research hasn't got that far yet.
No, it hasn't gotten that far because practically it's not feasible. Because we could do retrospective studies, but then that assumes that we collected DNA from people who died 20, 30 years ago. There are some studies that have this kind of information, but it's limited. And again, how do we capture the wealth of human experience? Because it's quite clear that it's not a simple formula, right? So we know that exercise is usually good for us, but some people exercise and die from a heart attack while they exercise, right? And so, because it's not just one thing, it's a complex combination of things. So we need to capture that complexity to provide the best advice or to test the hypothesis. So of course, if we test only one parameter, we'll get some sort of a signal, but we also get a lot of noise because we don't know the other parameters. So we have unexplained variables or unknown variables. And the more variables we capture, the better will be for us to test and predict. So I believe the next revolution will come by combining this with social media technology. So nobody will be able to pay, to follow up 1 billion people, complexity of life experiences. But technology allows us to do that. And there are two components to this revolution, or three components. One, of course, is the computer science that allows us to analyze complex equations in what we call neural networks or complex networks. So we cannot just put exercise, we will put everything, his relation with his wife, his relation with his teacher, his mother, his son, stressful events, and how much exercise, where did he exercise, how much oxygen did he breathe. So all these things are getting into, till now, there was no way we could do this. We can measure 2 or 3 parameters, but not more. The second element is the technology to get the data from the people and to collect the data, relatively simple, which was impossible till now. It would have been prohibitively expensive. Now it could be done actually at almost no cost because people have, this information is there, we just throw it away if we can collect it. And of course, the third element is a revolution in the way people think about health. So the traditional way we thought about health is you go to your doctor who is a god that knows everything, and he tells you what to do, and you follow his advice. And we see this even today. We see how the media talks about scientific advice regarding the virus epidemic, as if the guys who give you the advice know very much, but the truth is they know very little. And so we still have this false sense of security when somebody of authority tells us what to do. you know, whether it was the king or the prophet in the old days, or whether it is the doctor or the scientist today. But we realize that learning is a process, it's a dynamic process of partnership. So doctors don't know about your health. You probably know about your health more than the doctors. The doctor needs the information that you have, that he doesn't have, she or doesn't have. And if we can create this partnership where people take control and responsibility and agency over their health, and partner with those people who have higher level of information and ability to analyze data. And that's the third revolution that social media has done. You know, now the world where media is throwing things, official media is throwing things on people one way is over. People react, people can stream, people can interact. It creates a tremendous amount of fear of fake science, fake medicine, and we have a lot of it. But on the other hand, if it's done properly, it will allow this partnership, this taking of ownership, that a person takes ownership on his health, over his health. A person shares what he does with the best tools and the best knowledge to keep improving. And it's a self-learning process. I think the revolution will come from there, not from, you know, a big study that will show that certain things are useful.
Right. You're looking at the methylation of the DNA. So does it matter which tissue you're looking at? I mean, do different parts of the body age at different ways? And is there some relationship between them? I mean, yeah, I mean, can you just take one tissue and assume that that's what the body is?
So we have probably different kinds of aging markers in our DNA. There's some that are cell type specific. Others seem to be common in whatever tissue you take it from. So one of the things we checked was to see that the region that we're focusing on will show aging, that is, it will change as people age, similarly in blood and saliva, because these are the two tissues that, you know, are available. And of course, saliva is much easier than blood because blood will require some medical, it's a medical intervention.
Right, yeah.
And so for us, the major breakthrough was to see that there's no reason to take blood. The same markers work beautifully in saliva, and other studies showed that these regions are aging throughout the body, which is something that I mechanistically cannot explain. I don't understand how it's possible.
Right.
But it is what's happening. However, there are other regions that are specific to certain tissues, to the brain, and to probably immune system. And I think most of aging has to do with the immune system. And, you know, the immune system, I think, is extremely critical because almost every age-related disease, whether it's cancer, heart disease, cognitive decline, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, they are all connected. Right. They all show signals of the immune system. So a lot of people are focusing now on the aging of the immune system as a marker of all aging. So I believe there are clocks that are tissue specific, there are clocks that are body-wide. Somehow they're integrated, perhaps by the immune system. So the immune system is spreading signals across the body and somehow coordinating the age across the body.
Right.
But this is still a virgin area. There's so many questions. There's so many things that we don't understand based on the rules of biology that we know today. That means we might have to think about other rules, how this works. If, you know, for me, it sounds almost like a miracle, but it's very robust. That, you know, in every tissue, the methylation levels will be similar in those aging genes at a similar age. And why is it so? Because, you know, we have one copy of a gene, or two copies, one we inherited from father, one from mother, and they can either be methylated or not. So methylation is 100, you are either 100% methylated or 0% not methylated in any given cell. So when I say that when you're 70, your percentage of methylation is 70%, that means 70% of your cells are 100% methylated. Right. So that means there's a coordination going on to maintain in whatever tissue you hit, the same percentage of cells that are methylated and not methylated, which to me sounds like magic, but I'm sure there are some rules that guide this.
We spoke about the ability to slow the clock down, right? We said, so some people age faster, and there may be a way of making that, because it's epigenetic, be able to change it so that it can be slower. So do you think, so could we be able to reverse it? I mean, we do see like 1 or 2 signs that that is possible now. There have been some papers. So, I mean, do you see that it's possible to be able to reverse aging?
Theoretically, there's no reason why not to. Theoretically, there's no reason why not to convert a tissue of a 100-year-old to a tissue of a 0-year-old if you somehow erase all the additional epigenetic changes that happen through life. But because there's so many of them, and the coordination is critical. So it's not just moving methylation, it's moving methylation in a certain profile. And so that makes it complicated. Otherwise, we would have done it a while ago. So how can we recapitulate the process? Because it's like a cascade, this methylation changes now, and then that causes another one, and that will cause another one. So if you want to disrupt the whole system, it gets quite complicated to restore it to default. You can do it with a computer, right? Your computer fails and you reset it to default, to factory, and start again, building the program. And it happens all the time, right? Your phone kind of bugs up, and you just reset it to factory, and you start putting everything back again. So this is what you want to do in the most extreme cases. In less extreme cases, you don't want to become a baby, but you want to slow it down a bit. And it seems to be possible, which again, it's magical, because even though theoretical it's possible, the complexity suggests that it should be extremely complicated to rewire the methylation clock. But there are studies in animals that show it very clearly. A recent study was published where I think they took blood from a young animal, give it to an old animal, and he cut his age by half. And which suggests, again, points to the fact that the immune system is the critical guy here, because the cytokines and all the stuff that immune cells secrete to the blood are probably the ones that are doing the job. They send the signal, I'm 70-year-old, I'm 60-year-old, I'm 50-year-old. And also chemicals, a combination of chemicals was able to do that, which suggests that it's possible. So now the question is, what's the best way to do it? Is there going to be one chemical? No, because it's complex. So it should be a combination of things. And in my idea, it is sending the right signal to the system. So we need to know what signals to the system. I'm a young guy, I'm not an old guy, so therefore I have to, have my epigenetic profile in a certain way. And probably there are more natural things. There are probably natural signals that send us the signal. For example, if you stop being active, that's a signal to the body, okay, this guy doesn't need a system anymore, right? Just use it or lose it. So that's probably why exercise, most studies will suggest, contributes to younger aging. I think certain diets reflect, we don't understand, but probably evolutionary, they were good diets to send a signal to the body, you're not done yet, you're younger than you think you are. And so we have to recapitulate that. We have to somehow create a cocktail of behaviors that will send the signal to the body, slow down your age. You still have work to do. And we see the same, for example, in the cardiovascular system, right? If you exercise, your heart becomes better. Why? Because you're essentially telling your heart, I need you. If you don't exercise, you tell your heart, you can work 10% of the time because, I don't need you. So the whole body functions in this way, by which signals tell the epigenetic reprogramming, turn on the other app because I need to do this. And so exercise is good, not because it burns calories. because it sends signals both to the brain, the heart, the muscles. I need you. So I need to sharpen my cognitive skills because I need to navigate, sharp terrain and dangerous areas. So I need a good brain. I need to memorize navigation. And so all these things, so the use it or lose it is probably the best principle by which we can slow down the clock, because we are tapping into the natural evolutionary regulatory systems that actually regulate aging. And aging developed probably because there was an evolutionary need for it. And the need for it is that when you're not useful anymore, you're taking space and you're taking resources that could be used by more useful creatures. And so for us, it's very important to send the signals to the body that we are still useful. We still haven't finished our job. And we see that for many fields, even from mental decline or cognitive decline, we see that people who keep their head active, can slow down decline. It's the same idea, right? You're sending your brain the message, I need you, don't shut down. So, it's like we have a sleep command, like your computer, right? If you don't use it for 5 or 10 minutes, it just shuts down. Right. And so it's our body is the same. You don't use your brain. The brain doesn't see any need to be there. And one can think about it from evolutionary perspective because they are limited resources. So if you don't contribute, there's no reason for you to be there. And so the system evolved in a way that, it can grow and rejuvenate itself so that always you have, the best productive individuals in a species that contribute to the survival of the species. And so I think this is the game. The game is to figure out, not chemicals, but chemicals can do it because they mimic the natural processes, right? Chemicals don't work on their own. They work by interacting with what we call receptors. So there's something in the body that recognizes that chemical as something natural, and it says, okay, I need to do this. So the idea is you want your body to work, you want the body to continue to work, you have to give it the signals that nature has evolved to read, right? If you give the body signals that the nature cannot read, then they will not be useful. And I think the other element is heterogeneity, right? So all people age, all individual of a species will age to a certain lifespan, but we see there's variation in the lifespan. And that variation could derive from two reasons. One is just the natural genetic variation. And we talked about it before. There's some families, whatever you do to them, they will live to 100 years because they have a genetic combination that for some weird reason protects them from all these changes that happen, all these signals that happen through ages. And others live longer because probably they do the right things. They just don't know what they're doing, but they're probably doing the right things. It's the combination of things that they're doing that extends their life. And we have clues. For example, rich people live longer than poor people on average. And don't tell me the story about the rich guy who died from overdose at 25. Yeah, there are those. But overall, you see that. For example, people who have authority live longer than people who don't. Look at the current royal family of the United Kingdom. Yeah. And of course, they have a life full of stress. There's no lack of stress in the royal family, but there is tremendous amount of well-being that comes from being so wealthy and so important and so dominant, right? So we know from animals that dominant animals will live longer than subordinate animals. So we know that there are things we're doing or we happen to be in a context, and that's not genetic. We know that because you can change dominance. For example, if you remove the dominant animal, somebody else becomes dominant. And so it is the context that creates that situation. That has to do with the way the brain works, with the way the stress system works, and again, the immune system. Because that is I call the immune cells the sentinels, that walk around our body and just tell us what's going on and send back signals. So the challenge of modern medicine or modern well-being or modern health is, can we learn from each other to create the right mix that will extend our lives? And the heterogeneity also suggests that it's not going to be a formula for everyone, right?
Right.
We all do certain things that are good and certain things that are bad for, longevity. We want to remove the bad things without removing the good things. And so my combination, your can be different. So, exercise might be overall a really good idea, but if somebody has a mutation in a muscle heart in the gene, and he's very susceptible to high impact exercise, he might die from a heart attack. So he will age slow, but because that gene exists, so exercise for him is probably not the right solution, or, high impact exercise. So this is what makes it so complex, so challenging. On one hand, it's daunting. On the other hand, you say, yeah, we can figure this out, or we can do something about it.
So something you said at the beginning triggered a thought. So methylation. So I was thinking of methylation as like actually the cell being older, but is it more of just a measure, a way of measuring that the cell is older? So rejuvenating is actually more complex than just removing the methylation. There's a number of other things. So, and kind of a follow-on from that is that, so if we do look at the methylation, we see it's less, right, or improved, younger.
Right.
Does that mean the cell is younger, or does it just mean that the clock's kind of hand has moved, but we don't really know whether time has moved with it?
So the only way to find out is by trial and error, right? And in humans, it's very difficult to do. In animals, it's much harder it's much easier to test it. It's just that they just live shorter, so you can. So in experiments that have extended the life of animals, from really very simple forms of animals like worms up to, complex animals like mammals, it always involved a change, an epigenetic change. So the epigenetic change, if it is just a marker, it is extremely strongly tied to aging. So it seems to be a very good indicator.
Right.
So it could be the cause, it could be the consequence, but it's tightly linked. So from the practical point of view, it really doesn't make a difference. It serves us as an objective standard. Of course, we will know eventually if we got younger, because we'll live longer, and we will live longer without, disease. But that will take a few decades to figure it out. This serves as a proximal marker. But I believe that genes like this that have, very, very tight linkage to age cannot be just bystanders. They have to be main workers or main functionaries in this system. When I said that, a lot of things will change age, it means that this machinery that regulates gene expression, like methylation, that regulates critical genes in aging, is attentive to signals. It needs to know constantly, am I doing well or not? So it needs to know, do you need to age to slow down, or are you still active and I have to keep you young? And so so there's a whole cascade of events, probably from, the food, the exercise, the stress environment, dominance or subordination, whatever things that happen to humans that go into this, neural network, and the output is get older, get younger. And usually for most people, it's something that doesn't change. It's quite a constant thing, because life used to be very constant, right? So, if you were born a king, you will die a king, and that sends a certain signal. And if you were born a mine worker, you will be a mine worker, and that sends a certain signal. what makes life so complicated today is that we change constantly. There's mobility. We change countries, we change languages, we change cultures, we change climates. And so the system has to be much more, attuned to change. And so that's why the system is quite rigid, but still flexible, right? And I think what we're trying to do now is trick it back to get the signals that we want. We want to live longer. Maybe 100 years ago we were not interested. At a certain age we accepted the fact, that it's our time to leave, and we're compliant with this, and our body got the signals and eventually let us leave the world.
Right. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you found the video informative. In part 4 we will be talking about testing for biological age and the specific test that Professor Szyf's company uses. So please do subscribe and hit the bell button so that you get notifications when we release it. I wish you all well, and I will speak to you soon.